Welcome to the Deep Dive, the only show designed to take that stack of reading material you've been meaning to get to and turn it into pure, synthesized knowledge.
And our target today is a big one.
Maybe the biggest. We're talking about Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
It's a huge undertaking, really, because the man's biography is just as loaded with mythology as his compositional output.
Absolutely. I mean, we are talking about a composer who, in a tragically short life of just 35 years, produced over 800 cataloged works.
And these aren't just minor pieces. They span virtually every classical genre of his era: symphonic, concerto, chamber music, opera, choral, you name it.
And so many of them are still considered the absolute untouchable pinnacles of the repertoire.
The pace alone is just staggering.
It really is. But if your knowledge of Mozart stops at that image of the powdered-wig child prodigy playing for queens, you are missing the much more dramatic, fascinating, and frankly, much messier story.
The story of the pioneering independent artist he became.
Exactly. So our deep dive today is designed specifically to give you that fast, thorough, and structured understanding. We want to lift the veil of mythology
And explore the surprising details, the crucial political failures, and the personal contradictions that really shaped him. We're going to focus intensely on that period where he transitioned from a protected, controlled child star
into a revolutionary, debt-ridden, and ultimately free genius.
We've drawn on deep biographical and scholarly sources to connect those dots, focusing on how he developed that enduring style. The one noted for its melodic beauty, its formal elegance, and its richness of harmony and texture.
We are going to figure out how those grueling childhood tours paid off, why his professional resignation involved literally being physically kicked out of a building.
An amazing story.
And how he managed to write the towering Jupiter Symphony, while at the same time writing these pitiful letters begging his friends for loans.
Okay, let's unpack this genius.
Where do we begin?
We have to start at the genesis, Salzburg, 1756.
The story begins with his birth on January 27, 1756, in Salzburg. And we really need to contextualize this location right away.
Yeah, this wasn't the Austria we think of today.
Not at all. It was the Prince Archbishopric of Salzburg. So a small ecclesiastical principality governed by the church, sitting firmly within the vast structure of the Holy Roman Empire.
And that political structure is the first key insight. His entire early life, all his career prospects, they were dictated by the church hierarchy and aristocratic patronage.
A world of patrons, not customers.
Exactly. It demanded subservience. And before we move on, we have to acknowledge his full baptismal name. It tells you so much about the culture he was born into.
Let's hear it.
Johannes Chrysostomus Wolfgangus Theophilus Mozart.
Wow, that is truly a mouthful.
It is, and it's a reflection of the intense religious and naming customs of the time. While he had a few variations, as an adult, he most commonly went by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
What's absolutely vital here, though, is the role of his father, Leopold Mozart.
He's a central character in this whole story. Leopold was not some minor figure. He was an experienced teacher, a composer. By 1763, he was the orchestra's deputy Kapellmeister in Salzburg.
But more importantly for us, Leopold had established his pedagogical credibility the very year Wolfgang was born, 1756.
That's right. That was the year Leopold published his hugely successful and influential violin textbook, Versuch einer gründlichen Violinschule.
So the man who shaped the world's greatest musical mind was already a published, respected, and expert teacher.
This wasn't just random luck. It was focused preparation.
And this preparation met an astonishing level of innate genius.
And the accounts of Wolfgang's precocious ability, they aren't romanticized fluff. They are well documented, primarily by his elder sister, Maria Anna,
Whom everyone called Nannerl.
She recalled that when she began her keyboard lessons around age 7, her little brother Wolfgang, who was only 3
years old,
was already watching, absorbing everything, and picking out musical intervals at the clavier all on his own.
By age 5, he wasn't just imitating. He was competent on both keyboard and violin and had started composing little pieces.
And Leopold, being the meticulous teacher he was, wrote these down. They now form the very beginning of the catalog, K1 through K5, recorded in the Nannerl Notenbook.
And the sources emphasize that these initial compositions, his earliest violin efforts, they were often entirely of his own initiative.
It surprised even his father. And this is the pivotal moment for the family. Leopold, who was a decent but, a minor composer in his own right, recognized immediately the magnitude of his son's talent.
And he makes a choice.
A huge choice. He chose to essentially abandon his own creative career to focus entirely on managing, teaching, and, exhibiting Wolfgang.
He traded his identity as a composer for the role of the ultimate stage father.
And the exhibition began almost immediately.
So once the talent was clear, Leopold's strategy was pretty simple.
Show the world.
Exactly. The initial tours, starting in 1762 to the courts in Munich, Vienna, and Prague, were literally exhibitions. They were designed to showcase these two child prodigies, Wolfgang and Nannerl.
And while Nannerl was also highly accomplished, let's be clear, Wolfgang was undeniably the star attraction.
What follows is just an unprecedented childhood education. What the sources called the 3.5-year grand tour was anything but grand in terms of comfort.
Oh, it was a brutal cross-continental trek, spanning Munich, Mannheim, Paris, London, The Hague, Amsterdam, just everywhere.
We really should pause to consider the enormous human cost of this.
Absolutely. Travel in the 1760s was primitive, it was dangerous, it was slow. The family relied entirely on the hospitality and, frankly, the financial whims of the nobility.
So they were constantly stressed, constantly moving, constantly exposed to disease.
And the cost was nearly fatal, multiple times. Leopold fell gravely ill in London in 1764, and then both Wolfgang and Nannerl were struck down by severe near-fatal illnesses in The Hague in 1765.
So the image of the cheerful, composing prodigy really glosses over the reality of this intense physical and emotional gauntlet.
It does. But musically, it was the greatest education money couldn't buy.
Right. Mozart wasn't just performing. He was absorbing the entire European musical landscape.
The exposure to these cosmopolitan centers allowed him to internalize all the different national styles. And the most crucial influence during this period was Johann Christian Bach.
J.S. Bach's youngest son.
The youngest son whom Wolfgang visited in London between 1764 and 1765.
Okay, let's unpack that influence. What was J.C. Bach doing that was so different?
Well, J.C. Bach, often called the London Bach, was instrumental in developing what they called the style galant. So think of the Baroque style as, dense, complex, full of heavy counterpoint, like a heavily embroidered tapestry.
Right.
The style galant was a reaction against that. It emphasized grace, clarity, and simple, beautiful melody. It was light, easy on the ear, and very, very fashionable.
So meeting Bach helped Mozart internalize that elegance, which later became the foundation of the classical style.
It was a perfect synthesis. And speaking of forging, during this London trip, at the age of 8, Mozart wrote his first symphony.
8 years old. It's often debated how much of the transcription was his father's hand, but the creative input was certainly Wolfgang's.
And following the Grand Tour came these 3 crucial trips to Italy between 1769 and 1773.
And these were different. These were specific missions led by Leopold.
Yes, aimed purely at securing a prestigious, permanent professional appointment in a major city.
While the main goal failed, these journeys confirmed his genius to the musical elite. In Bologna, he studied with the famed theorist Giovanni Battista Martini.
And met the popular composer Joseph Haydn. And crucially, Mozart was accepted into the prestigious Accademia Philharmonica.
Which was a huge validation, right? You had to pass a strict test based on counterpoint mastery to get in.
A very strict test. And this is where we get to the legendary Mazurka myth.
Yeah.
It perfectly captures the mixture of his staggering auditory memory and his youthful audacity.
Tell us the story again, because even if some parts are disputed, it speaks volumes about his reputation.
Okay, so the piece was Gregorio Allegri's Miserere. It was performed exclusively in the Sistine Chapel during Holy Week and was regarded as closely guarded Vatican property.
So copying it or disseminating it was strictly forbidden.
Under penalty of excommunication.
Wow.
The story claims that in 1770, 14-year-old Mozart heard the piece once, went back to his lodgings, and wrote out the entire complex score from memory.
Just from memory, after one listen.
Then he returned to hear it a second time and corrected a few minor details. An unauthorized copy of a highly secretive piece transcribed after 2 hearings.
And his artistic successes led directly to opera commissions in Milan.
Yes. Mitridate, Re di Ponto in 1770, Ascanio in Alba in 1771, and Licio Silla in 1772. These were successful premieres that should have sealed his fate as a sought-after composer.
But it didn't work out that way.
No. The political system defeated Leopold's grand plan. His central goal, a secure, high-status court appointment, was repeatedly blocked.
And the ultimate obstruction came from Empress Maria Theresa.
Yes, who, despite recognizing his immense talent, was reluctant to employ, and this is her quote, useless people.
Useless people.
Yeah.
So the young composer was essentially dismissed by the crown as a high-class novelty act.
Someone who didn't fit the needs of a stable, functional court.
That failure The ultimate disappointment of his father's decade-long investment forced Mozart to return to his provincial hometown of Salzburg.
But the trip wasn't a total loss artistically. The solo motet Exultat Jubilate K165 emerged during this period.
And it perfectly showcases that dazzling, light Italianate mastery he had absorbed.
It's the ultimate contradiction, isn't it? By age 17, he was perhaps the most accomplished musician in Europe, yet he had failed to secure the one thing his father demanded: stability.
He was back in Salzburg, poised for a dramatic confrontation with authority.
So Mozart is back in Salzburg in 1773, forced to take a job as a court musician for Prince Archbishop Hieronymus Colloredo.
And this is where the genius starts to collide violently with bureaucracy.
Right. He was a recognized genius, stuck working for a man who primarily viewed him as a slightly superior household servant.
And the work schedule was relentless.
It resulted in this prodigious output of symphonies, sonatas, quartets, demonstrating his versatility across every genre. But the internal cost was immense.
Let's talk about the finances for a second, because this is crucial to understanding his resentment.
Okay.
His salary was 150 florins a year. That just sounds like a historical number floating in the air, so let's try to contextualize it.
Well, to give you perspective, a comfortable middle-class life in Salzburg at the time required several hundred florins a year. A skilled teacher or a mid-level civil servant might earn 300 to 400 florins.
So 150 florins was basically pocket money.
Barely. Especially for a celebrated composer who had just performed across Europe, it fueled his increasing desire for a life of professional respect, not servitude.
And despite the low pay, the creativity just soared.
It did. Between April and December 1775, he composed 5 violin concertos, the only ones he ever wrote.
And the last 3 of those are staples in the modern repertoire.
Absolutely. And then, early in 1777, came the breakthrough E-flat piano concerto, K271, known as the Genome Concerto.
Why is that one considered a landmark?
Because K271 is critically recognized as a work that breaks free from the polite conventions of the style galant. It begins to integrate real drama and symphonic complexity into the concerto form.
So he was pushing the boundaries, even while he was trapped in Salzburg.
Exactly. But his discontent just grew and grew. Beyond the low salary, he desperately longed to compose operas.
Which he viewed as the highest form of musical expression.
Yes. And Salzburg rarely afforded him this opportunity. The closure of the court theater in 1775 essentially capped his artistic possibilities in that provincial city.
He felt suffocated.
Completely. He was writing background music for the Archbishop's services or dinners. He knew his destiny was in the great European capitals, writing for the grand stage.
That growing frustration boiled over, leading him to resign his post in August 1777.
And he ventures out again, actively searching for a replacement job. He took his mother, Anna Maria, with him this time, visiting Augsburg, Mannheim, Munich, and Paris.
The Mannheim stop was important for his continued musical synthesis, wasn't it?
It was. He encountered the Mannheim Orchestra, which was renowned across Europe for its discipline, its dynamic range, its technical virtuosity.
So he absorbed these advanced instrumental techniques and integrated them into his orchestration.
But Mannheim also provided a major personal distraction.
A failure of the heart.
Yes. He fell deeply in love with Aloysia Weber, the second of 4 talented musical sisters. But, like the employment prospects he was looking for, the romantic prospects failed to materialize.
And he had to continue his fruitless search in Paris in March 1778.
Paris proved to be a disaster, both personally and financially. The search for a prestigious, well-paying job was fruitless.
He was hinting almost desperately at a possible but unwanted organist post at Versailles.
He quickly fell into debt, relying on loans and pawning valuables just to survive.
And this is where the deep dive turns really tragic.
Yes, the summer of 1778 became the nadir, the absolute lowest point of his life. His mother, Anna Maria, who was traveling with him, died in Paris on July 3rd, 1778.
And the tragedy was likely compounded by their financial situation.
Biographers suggest there may have been delays in calling a proper physician because they just didn't have the funds.
To lose his mother, far from home, broke, and having failed in his mission, it must have been utterly crushing.
This experience of grief and failure, far removed from the protective bubble of his childhood, it certainly hardened the 22-year-old Mozart.
Leopold, still back in Salzburg, used his connections and secured Wolfgang a post back home.
Court organist and concertmaster, with a slightly improved salary of 450 florins a year.
Reluctantly, Wolfgang returned in January 1779.
And while the salary was better, the environment and the discontent were exactly the same.
However, the Paris journey did produce works that showed a new emotional maturity, a new darkness.
Yes, notably the deeply personal and sorrowful A Minor Piano Sonata, K310, and the confident Paris Symphony No. 31. He was maturing into a master.
But still bound by the chains of the provincial court.
The stage was set for the final violent break, and it began with success.
His opera Idomeneo premiered triumphantly in Munich in January 1781.
So Mozart, riding this wave of operatic triumph, was summoned to Vienna by Archbishop Colloredo in March.
But Colloredo brought him to Vienna for the celebrations marking Emperor Joseph II's accession, and he immediately reasserted his dominance. Mozart, a successful opera composer, was forced to dine with the valets and the cooks in the Archbishop's establishment.
That wasn't just a minor inconvenience. That was a deliberate, intense humiliation.
Designed to remind Mozart exactly where he stood in the social hierarchy as a servant.
Mozart, however, saw Vienna as pure opportunity. He was determined to shed that role of servant and establish himself as a serious public figure.
He aimed to meet Emperor Joseph II and, crucially, participate in public concerts like the prestigious Tonkünstler Society series.
So he wanted to perform his own music for his own profit.
Exactly. And Colloredo absolutely opposed this pursuit of independent income and status.
He viewed any outside performance as a defiance of his authority.
The tension escalated when Colloredo blocked Mozart from playing before the emperor at Countess Thun's residence.
And that one gig would have paid him a massive 25 ducats.
Which was equivalent to half of his new yearly Salzburg salary. The financial stakes were immense.
So when Mozart realized he could earn a year's wages in 2 hours outside of Colloredo's control,
the dynamic became unsustainable. The quarrel reached a climax in May when Mozart attempted to resign and Colloredo refused.
a classic 18th century power struggle. Colloredo wanted total control over his property, which is Mozart, but Mozart, emboldened by his success and his presence in the capital, demanded autonomy.
And the final dismissal came in June 1781.
The Archbishop finally granted permission for Mozart to leave, but he did so in the most grossly insulting way possible.
His steward, Count Arco, literally administered the dismissal with a kick in the arse.
A physical kick.
Yes, that physical assault is the critical, visceral moment that symbolizes the end of the Baroque system for Mozart. It wasn't just a professional separation. It was a physical humiliation that catalyzed a revolutionary life choice.
The biographer Maynard Solomon called Mozart's decision to settle in Vienna as a freelance performer and composer a revolutionary step. And he was right.
But wasn't it also deeply reckless?
Oh, incredibly. His father, Leopold, sided entirely against him, urging him to reconcile and return obediently.
So he'd lost his job, his primary relationship with his father was severed, and he had no guaranteed income in the most expensive city in Europe.
It was absolutely reckless, fueled by a mixture of artistic necessity and, I think, a deep psychological need for freedom after decades of control. But it was also necessary.
He realized that the ceiling in Salzburg was just too low for his genius.
He chose independence over security. The safety net was gone, and that instability would define the rest of his life.
With the shackles off, Mozart's career in Vienna just exploded.
Immediately, he established himself not just as a competent musician, but as the finest keyboard player in Vienna.
And his supremacy was cemented almost right away. We have that famous account of his competition before Emperor Joseph II in December 1781.
Against the renowned Italian composer and keyboardist Muzio Clementi.
And Mozart decisively won the emperor's favor, establishing himself as the city's new musical superstar.
His success as a composer was equally swift. His opera, The Entführung aus dem Seraglio, Abduction from the Seraglio, premiered on July 16, 1782.
It was a massive hit.
A huge success throughout German-speaking Europe. It was a major artistic victory, solidifying his reputation as a major composer, completely independent of court sponsorship. This was proof that his revolutionary move had paid off.
Artistically, at least. And personally, his life was moving just as fast.
After the romantic failure with Aloysia Weber in Mannheim, he quickly turned his attention to her sister, Constanze,
The third daughter of the family who had moved to Vienna.
The courtship, however, was, well, it was fraught. This wasn't the romantic, soaring melodies of Entführung. This was messy, real-life drama.
Biographers point to his volatile jealousy, highlighted by a major crisis when Constanze permitted a young man, in the spirit of a parlor game, to measure her calves.
It's amazing, isn't it? A man capable of writing Don Giovanni nearly broke off his engagement over a calf measurement.
What does that tell us about his intense emotional life?
I think it shows his immense insecurity, which contrasted so sharply with his professional confidence. The break with Colorado had created this huge rift with his father, Leopold, who was still furious and fiercely opposed the marriage.
So securing his father's permission was a major difficulty.
And the marriage took place in an atmosphere of intense crisis. Constanze had possibly moved in with Mozart, which placed her in severe disgrace by the standards of Viennese society.
He was genuinely worried about Constanze's mother potentially calling the police to break them up.
So they rushed the ceremony. They married on August 4th, 1782, in St. Stephen's Cathedral.
And Leopold's reluctant, late consent arrived the very next day.
This was a marriage forged under duress, driven by necessity and passion, not calm planning.
And tragically, the couple had 6 children. But infant mortality being what it was in the 18th century, only 2 survived infancy.
Carl Thomas Mozart and Franz Xaver Wolfgang Mozart. This constant presence of loss must have just shadowed all their triumphs.
These next 5 years, though, they represent Mozart's undisputed artistic zenith.
And the highest point of his financial prosperity. He was fully integrated into the intellectual and cultural life of Vienna. A key development was his deep study of the music of J.S. Bach and Handel.
And this was largely made possible by Baron Gottfried van Swieten.
Van Swieten was a pivotal figure. He had a valuable private collection of late Baroque manuscripts, and he held these Sunday musical gatherings where Mozart was exposed to and began profoundly studying these works.
How did that study transform his music?
It led to the integration of complex counterpoint, the intricate interwoven melodies of the Baroque into the elegant clarity of the classical style.
So we see this synthesis in works like the fugal passages in the finale of his Jupiter Symphony.
And within the dense textures of Die Zauberflöte, he wasn't just performing the style gallant anymore, he was giving it intellectual weight.
He was building a bridge between the previous century and the new one.
And equally important was his professional friendship with Joseph Haydn, whom he met around 1784.
They would often play together in impromptu string quartets, cementing this deep mutual professional respect.
And Haydn, who was the established giant of the era, recognized Mozart's unique genius. The famous quote he gave to Leopold in 1785 is legendary.
What did he say?
"I tell you before God, and as an honest man, your son is the greatest composer known to me by person and repute. He has taste, and what is more, the greatest skill in composition."
That's historic validation from the man who basically defined the symphony.
And Mozart responded by dedicating 6 of his own masterly string quartets to Haydn, directly acknowledging the influence of Haydn's Opus 33 set. This was an exchange between equals.
Professionally, Mozart was thriving as the ultimate freelance musician.
From 1782 to 1785, he essentially created his own market as a performer-composer. He would premiere 3 or 4 new piano concertos each season, performing as the soloist in highly popular public concerts.
And he showed entrepreneurial creativity in booking venues.
Oh yeah. Since theater space was limited, he rented large, non-traditional venues, like a hall in the Tratnerhof apartment building or the ballroom of the Melgrube restaurant.
And these concerts were hugely popular and lucrative.
Which brings us to the great financial paradox. The substantial returns from these successful concerts enabled a lifestyle of luxury that was completely unsustainable for a freelancer.
He adopted the spending habits of the aristocracy he served, rather than the saving habits of the bourgeoisie.
Let's break down those expenses to really understand the recklessness. He moved into a lavish apartment with a yearly rent of 460 florins.
An immense sum.
He bought a fine fortepiano from Anton Walter for about 900 florins.
And perhaps most famously, a billiard table for 300 florins.
And he was sending his son to expensive schools, keeping servants. I mean, this reflects a total lack of financial discipline.
He treated his income, which could fluctuate wildly depending on the concert season, as if it were a guaranteed annuity from an aristocratic post.
Biographers note he saved virtually nothing. This inability to transition from the mindset of a court musician to a self-employed businessman would eventually destroy him.
In the midst of this whirlwind, he found structure and intellectual focus in Freemasonry.
Yes, he joined the lodge zur Wohltätigkeit, or Beneficence, on December 14th, 1784.
And Freemasonry became a crucial social and spiritual network for him.
It reinforced the Enlightenment ideals of reason, morality, and brotherhood that you can see permeating works like the Magic Flute. This affiliation provided a stable intellectual framework that his personal life otherwise lacked.
And then came the collaborations that cemented his legacy for all time. The operas, written with librettist Lorenzo da Ponte.
Shifting his focus away from the keyboard in late 1785, this partnership led to three masterpieces: Le Nozze di Figaro, The Marriage of Figaro in 1786.
And Don Giovanni in 1787.
These were revolutionary in their depiction of class and psychology. Figaro was based on a politically volatile play that depicted servants outsmarting their masters.
A daring subject in aristocratic Vienna.
And Don Giovanni was even darker, mixing comedy, opera buffa, with serious moral themes and tragedy, opera seria, creating this hybrid that challenged the expectations of the time.
The genius in this partnership wasn't just the music, but the depth of the characterization. Da Ponte provided the psychological complexity.
And Mozart gave that complexity a voice through intricate orchestral color and dramatic setting.
Tragically, though, the golden years were short-lived.
Very. By late 1787, his professional fortunes began to decline rapidly. He did secure a steady aristocratic post in December 1787 when Emperor Joseph II appointed him chamber composer.
Which sounds like a step up, but it wasn't a lucrative position.
Not at all. It was part-time, paying a modest 800 florins a year. The emperor's intent was clear. This was a retainer fee designed specifically to keep Mozart from leaving Vienna.
To stop him from taking his genius to London or Berlin?
Yeah.
But it was not enough to cover his lifestyle.
And the underlying problem was the macroeconomy. Around 1786, Mozart stopped performing as frequently, which was his main source of large, unpredictable income.
And compounding this, the Austro-Turkish War severely decreased general prosperity.
Exactly. The aristocracy couldn't afford their lavish concerts and commissions anymore, and the freelance market just evaporated.
That economic reality hit hard. Scholars estimate that Mozart saw a 66% decline in his income compared to his peak years just 5 years earlier.
So the man who was used to spending 460 florins a year on rent now had almost no discretionary income.
And this is where the historical record becomes really painful to read.
Mozart's financial desperation is preserved in a pitiful sequence of letters pleading for loans, primarily sent to his fellow Freemason, Michael von Puchberg.
These aren't just casual requests. They are often heart-wrenching appeals for immediate relief.
And the contrast between the sheer quality of his art and the misery of his personal life is just devastating.
Scholars suggest that the intense stress of the financial chaos led to severe depression. His musical output slowed dramatically.
And his professional letters were dominated by logistics and money worries rather than artistic inspiration.
Yet, even from this nadir, masterpieces emerged.
Yes. In 1788, he composed his last three symphonies, number 39, number 40, the Great G Minor, and the Magnificent Jupiter, number 41, all within a matter of weeks.
The G Minor is a work of intense, tragic despair, written during a time when he was simultaneously begging Puchberg for 100 florins.
He also completed the third Da Ponte opera, Così fan tutte, in 1790. But his desperation for cash led him to undertake these long, unsuccessful journeys.
Leipzig, Dresden, Berlin, Frankfurt, and Mannheim in 1789 and 1790.
And these travels failed to secure the permanent, high-paying position that could have saved his solvency.
He was a superstar begging for money in an economy that simply couldn't support him.
The tragedy is that the freedom he fought for in 1781 was now the very cause of his misery.
Before we discuss his innovations, let's just paint a picture of the man himself. The image we have of the powdered wig genius often obscures the person. What was Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart actually like?
Well, physically, he was noted as a remarkably small man, very thin and pale, and his face was pitted from a childhood case of smallpox.
But biographers note he was highly conscious of his appearance.
Oh, yes, possessing fine, fair hair, of which he was rather vain, and he loved elegant clothing.
He didn't dress like a struggling artist. The tenor Michael Kelly recalled seeing him at rehearsals in a crimson pelisse and gold-laced cocked hat.
Looking every inch the aristocrat he wanted to be. He also indulged in aristocratic leisure billiards, dancing, keeping pets, including a starling, and a horse for riding.
And what about his work habits? The image of effortless perfection. Is that accurate?
It's somewhat misleading. He certainly worked at a tremendous pace to meet deadlines. Composing the last three symphonies in 2 months is proof of that.
Right.
But the sources clarify that he did, in fact, make sketches and drafts. Unlike Beethoven, who kept these meticulous, struggling notebooks, most of Mozart's preparatory work is not preserved.
Why not?
His wife, Constanze, sought to destroy many of the sketches after his death, viewing them perhaps as evidence of imperfection. It's a major loss for musicology.
He maintained a wide social circle. But beyond the famous friendship with Haydn, there's a truly fascinating figure in his circle. The horn player, Joseph Haydn.
Ah, yes. Mozart delighted in playing elaborate, often cruel, practical jokes on Leitgeb. He was clearly a man who needed an outlet for his playful, sometimes aggressive humor.
And speaking of humor, we have to address the scholarship that highlights his startling fondness for scatological humor.
It's such a jarring contrast with the formal elegance of his music.
It is intensely human and jarring. This love for crude, vulgar, often fecal humor is preserved not only in anecdotal accounts but also in his surviving letters.
Notably those exchanged with his cousin Maria Anna Thekla Mozart, his Bess. Furthermore, he actually composed a series of scatological canons that he sang with friends.
Why do scholars emphasize this so much?
Because it adds an essential, earthier, and almost juvenile layer to the genius. The man who wrote the purity of Ave Verum Corpus also enjoyed composing musical jokes about passing gas.
This profound contradiction helps us understand the dual nature of his creative personality.
And finally, we should note his affiliations. He was raised and remained a devout Catholic, but his intellectual and social life centered increasingly on the teachings and fellowship of Freemasonry after he joined the lodge in 1784.
Which provided the philosophical basis for the themes of virtue and wisdom we see in his final works.
When we talk about musical style, we have to begin by stating the obvious. Mozart, along with Haydn, defines the classical era. His music is characterized by clarity, balance, and transparency in structure.
He took the established forms, the symphony, the string quartet, the piano concerto, and advanced their technical sophistication and emotional depth to a point that subsequent composers really struggled to match.
But focusing only on the elegance misses the dark undercurrent. The sources remind us that to understand Mozart, we have to recognize the exceptional power of his finest masterpieces, which often concealed profound emotional turmoil.
This is where we bring in the analysis of the critic Charles Rosen,
Who argued that, and I'm quoting, "It is only through recognizing the violence and sensuality at the center of Mozart's work that we can make a start towards a comprehension of his structures."
And you can hear this in the turbulence of the Piano Concerto No. 24 in C minor, K491.
Or the agonizing intensity of Symphony No. 40 in G minor, K550, and the psychological terror inherent in Don Giovanni.
Rosen's phrase, shockingly voluptuous terror, is key. How did he balance that deep emotional capacity with the structural clarity of the classical style?
Through that synthesis we discussed earlier, his youthful travels exposed him to the light, simple, highly melodic style gallant of Italy and London.
But his maturity, fueled by the study of Bach and Handel, allowed him to progressively reintroduce the complex counterpoint of the late Baroque.
He used the classical structure, like sonata form, as a container, but he filled it with Baroque sophistication and proto-romantic emotion.
His versatility in opera is equally impressive. He successfully composed in every prevailing style of the time, often mixing and elevating them. Let's quickly define those types for the listener.
Sure. First, you have opera seria, the serious opera, usually dealing with mythological or historical figures, featuring high drama and noble characterization. That's Idomeneo.
Right.
Then there's opera buffa, the comic opera, which used contemporary subjects and featured rapid-fire ensembles and farcical plots. That's Figaro.
And finally, the German style.
Singspiel, which literally means sing play, characterized by spoken dialogue interspersed with songs and arias. And that's the Magic Flute. Mozart mastered all three.
To give the listener a practical tool for identification, we need to quickly discuss the Köchel catalog.
Ah, yes, the Köchel catalog is essential for any discussion of Mozart. Because of the vast output and the sheer number of works, every known composition is assigned a unique number, chronologically ordered, followed by the abbreviation K, or KV.
KV for Köchel for tightness.
Exactly. Ludwig von Köchel first completed this in 1862. It allows us to distinguish between, say, K1A, an early minuet, and K626, the unfinished Requiem.
And finally, regarding his instrumentation, what was the preferred vehicle for this keyboard master?
He rapidly abandoned the harpsichord for the fortepiano, the ancestor of the modern piano, which was capable of greater dynamics and subtle expression.
He was highly discerning, admiring the instruments of Johann Andreas Stein.
But in Vienna, he purchased and consistently relied on an instrument made by Anton Walter, which is now exhibited in Salzburg.
And his father confirmed just how central that specific instrument was to his career.
He wrote that your brother's pianoforte has been moved at least 12 times from his house to the theater or to someone else's house for his constant public performances.
He was literally dragging his means of production all over the capital.
Mozart's last year, 1791, presents the final massive contradiction.
Despite the previous years dominated by financial desperation and depression, It was a time of high productivity and, crucially, one of financial stabilization.
That is a critical detail that often gets overlooked in the death narrative. His finances were finally beginning to improve.
He was paying off debts, and it's believed he secured annuities from wealthy patrons in Amsterdam and Hungary, along with lucrative income from the sale of dance music.
And this stabilization coincided with the surge of late masterpieces. This is the year he produced the Magic Flute, which was a tremendous public success and earned him much-needed funds.
He also wrote the sublime clarinet concerto, K622, the final piano concerto, K595, his last string quintet.
And of course, the unfinished Requiem, K626.
The productivity was astonishing, but tragically it came to an abrupt halt. He fell ill in Prague in September 1791.
This was during the premiere of his opera La Clemenza di Tito. His health deteriorated sharply, and by November 20th, he was completely bedridden, suffering from swelling, pain, and vomiting.
And he was deeply preoccupied with finishing the Requiem right up until his death.
The romantic image persists that he dictated complex passages to his student Franz Xaver Süssmayr from his deathbed, but the consensus among scholars is that evidence for extensive dictation is minimal.
He was just trying desperately to finish it, knowing it would be his final testament.
Mozart died on December 5th, 1791, at the age of 35. And the circumstances of his burial have become heavily mythologized,
Often depicting a neglected pauper's funeral.
which is a crucial clarification of the facts. His funeral was modest, yes, but entirely consistent with contemporary Viennese customs for a man of his standing.
He was interred in a common grave at St. Mark's Cemetery, but this did not mean a communal pit.
Right. It meant an individual grave for a non-aristocratic person, which, unlike the perpetual graves of the nobility, was subject to excavation after 10 years.
And the dramatic accounts of a storm and snow during the burial.
Are definitively false. Records show the day was calm and mild.
And then there is the enduring mystery of his death. The official record listed the cause vaguely as Hitsage's Freesel fever.
Or severe miliary fever, which simply described a ration fever, not a modern diagnosis.
Because of that vagueness, researchers have suggested over 100 possible causes.
Everything from acute rheumatic fever, streptococcal infection, trichinosis, to various kidney ailments, or even mercury poisoning. The truth remains uncertain.
But what is absolutely certain is the immediate reaction to his death.
Immediately following his passing, his reputation just exploded in an unprecedented wave of enthusiasm.
Biographies were rushed into production, and publishers scrambled to create complete authoritative editions of his works.
His influence became tectonic, shaping the entire generation of composers who followed. Perhaps his most famous student was Ludwig van Beethoven.
15 years his junior.
Beethoven deeply internalized Mozart's work. He traveled to Vienna in 1787 hoping to study with him, performed his operas, and even wrote cadenzas for his concertos, specifically the D minor piano concerto K466.
Beethoven knew that Mozart had paved the way for musical independence.
What we have seen in this deep dive is the defining tension of Mozart's life, the struggle between the suffocating structure of institutional service
Exemplified by his humiliating treatment in Salzburg by Colorado.
and his necessary, revolutionary, artistic independence, which he fought for in Vienna.
And woven through that political struggle is the profound contradiction between financial chaos, the man buying expensive forte pianos and billiards tables one year,
While writing works of transcendent beauty and begging for loans the next, and a soaring, prodigious creative output that seemingly never wavered in quality, even under duress.
Ultimately, the enduring miracle of Mozart is the purity of his sound combined with that profound emotional capacity for violence and sensuality we discussed.
It brings to mind Albert Einstein's famous, beautiful quote, "Mozart's music is so pure it seems to have been ever present in the universe."
It's an image of divine channeling. But that leads us to a final provocative thought for you, the learner, to consider.
Given the extraordinary blend of Mozart's meticulous structure, his capacity for that shockingly voluptuous terror, and his profound use of complex Baroque counterpoint, how much of Mozart's music was truly that divine inspiration, the pure channel that Einstein speaks of?
And how much was the sheer result of the intense, disciplined, synthesizing musical practice imposed upon him during the grueling, formative grand tours of his childhood?
Was the chaotic, independent life he led in Vienna, the very freedom that nearly bankrupted him and perhaps shortened his life, merely the inevitable price paid by an artistic genius finally freed from the suffocating structure that had, in fact, forged his brilliance?
That is the ultimate tension we leave you with.